New York City never slept, its streets pulsing with life even as darkness cloaked its towering skyline. Yet, for one family, the night brought terror instead of the usual hum of city activity. Emily Watson, a bright and talented 16-year-old, disappeared without a trace from her piano lesson in a downtown studio. Her absence was discovered only hours later, leaving a trail of confusion, panic, and an eerie silence in her wake. Benjamin Hard received the call just past midnight. The calm, measured voice on the other end, Emily's father, was laced with desperation and fear. "Benjamin, you're the only one I can trust," he said, his words barely concealing his trembling. "They took her, and the police, they're at a loss. Please, you have to help us." Arriving at the Watson residence, Benjamin was immediately struck by the contrast between the home's elegance and the chaos of the moment. Staff whispered nervously in corners, and the air was thick with worry. Emily's father, a man accustomed to control and influence, seemed unmoored, pacing the spacious living room with clenched fists. Benjamin's analytical mind, however, cut through the panic like a scalpel, focusing on details overlooked by the frantic household. The first observation was subtle: the piano lesson studio schedule and security records showed no forced entry. Surveillance footage revealed nothing unusual, only Emily walking in and then vanishing hours later. Yet Benjamin's instincts told him that the answer lay not in brute evidence, but in nuance. He noticed the way a vase on the hallway table had been slightly shifted, as if someone had brushed past it in haste. He noted the placement of shoes near the door, one pair aligned unusually, suggesting a hurried exit, perhaps even carried rather than walked. Benjamin questioned the staff and family members individually, noting micro-expressions and inconsistencies. A housekeeper hesitated before answering a simple question about Emily's after-school routine. The father's assistant mentioned seeing a delivery man leave unusually late, but could not recall details. Each hesitation, each misstep, however minor, became a thread Benjamin intended to follow. Then came the first clue, a small, folded piece of paper tucked behind the piano bench. It bore a cryptic message, written in precise, almost theatrical handwriting: "The clock is running. Listen carefully to what you hear." No signature, no immediate indication of intent. Yet Benjamin recognized the hallmark of psychological manipulation, a calculated move to unnerve, to provoke reaction, and to assert control. As Benjamin examined the note, his mind raced through possible interpretations. It could be a timer, a signal, or even a misdirection. Each possibility opened a different path, a distinct layer of complexity. The city around him remained alive and indifferent, unaware that the life of a young girl hung in precarious balance, guided by the cunning and unpredictability of unseen predators. By the end of the night, Benjamin had assembled the first pieces of the puzzle. He knew the disappearance was not random, that the perpetrators had thought carefully about the timing and method, and that the key to finding Emily lay hidden in the subtle details, the traces left behind by panic, haste, and human nature itself. As he left the Watson residence, Benjamin's mind was already moving ahead, connecting invisible threads and anticipating moves he could not yet see. The case had begun, and every instinct told him it would demand not just intellect, but an unerring attention to the psychology of fear, deception, and control. The vanishing of Emily Watson was only the opening act in a dangerous and complex story, one that would test Benjamin Hard as never before. The next morning, Manhattan shimmered under the soft light of dawn, yet the city's beauty was no comfort to Benjamin Hard. His mind was consumed with questions: how had Emily Watson disappeared without leaving a trace? Who could orchestrate such a meticulous act? And most pressing, where could she be? Returning to the piano studio, Benjamin moved slowly through the room, his keen eyes scanning every inch for clues overlooked by others. The space was pristine, almost sterile, yet his attention caught subtle disturbances: a faint scuff on the wooden floor, a smudge on the edge of the piano bench, and an oddly placed chair that suggested someone had crouched or leaned hastily. Each small irregularity became a thread in the web he was beginning to weave. Benjamin crouched to examine a tiny shard of glass, barely visible in the corner. It appeared to have been part of a broken watch or decorative item, displaced in a rush. His photographic memory cataloged the position, angle, and possible trajectory, allowing him to reconstruct part of the sequence of events. It was a minor detail to most, but Benjamin knew that such minutiae often revealed the unseen hand of a criminal. He then turned his attention to the cryptic note discovered the night before. The phrase, "Listen carefully to what you hear," suggested auditory cues, perhaps a sound, a pattern, or a signal intentionally left by the perpetrators. Benjamin considered the possibilities. Was it a timed signal, an indirect message to the family, or simply a psychological ruse designed to instill fear and urgency? His mind worked in layers, evaluating not just the content, but the intent behind each word. Interviews with staff and neighbors revealed inconsistencies that others had dismissed. A neighbor recalled seeing a black sedan parked unusually long near the studio, though he had thought nothing of it at the time. A delivery worker mentioned an unmarked van that lingered on the block for a brief period the evening of the disappearance. Benjamin catalogued these accounts carefully, cross-referencing them against known routes, traffic patterns, and security footage to begin forming a timeline. Then there was Emily's own routine, meticulously documented in her calendar. Benjamin noted discrepancies between the usual schedule and what occurred on the day of her disappearance. Small deviations, late arrivals, missed rehearsals, or delayed messages, could indicate where the abductors had exploited vulnerability. Every tiny irregularity became part of the emerging picture, a network of precise actions, psychological manipulation, and calculated timing. Benjamin also began constructing psychological profiles of potential perpetrators. He considered the likelihood of multiple actors versus a single, highly skilled individual. The note's sophistication suggested someone with education, patience, and a flair for theatrics, someone who enjoyed exerting control and testing others' perception. The lack of violence pointed to careful planning and an understanding of fear's subtle power. Hours turned into evening as Benjamin assembled the first layer of his mental map. Locations, movements, behavior patterns, and possible motivations intertwined to form a delicate framework. He knew this was only the beginning. Each clue demanded scrutiny, each pattern required verification, and every misstep could endanger Emily further. By nightfall, Benjamin had identified the most probable locations for further investigation and the potential psychological profile of the kidnapper or kidnappers. The city's lights glittered like distant stars, indifferent to the unfolding crisis. Yet within the shadows, Benjamin hard worked with a precision born of experience, intellect, and unyielding resolve. The first clues had been found, but the path ahead was treacherous and intricate, demanding the full measure of his analytical skill. Benjamin left the studio quietly, aware that the investigation had truly begun. Every detail, no matter how minute, could be the key to finding Emily Watson. And he was determined to follow the trail, no matter where it led. The bustling energy of New York City often masked the most subtle of signals, but Benjamin Hard thrived in such environments. Each honk, footstep, and whispered conversation was data, a thread that could lead him closer to Emily Watson. He turned his focus to the digital realm, where modern criminals often left the faintest traces. Benjamin began by analyzing Emily's electronic footprint, her phone, her email, and social media accounts. The first anomalies were subtle: deleted messages, encrypted emails, and phone calls from untraceable numbers. To an ordinary observer, these would appear as minor disruptions, but Benjamin recognized a pattern, a carefully constructed trail designed to distract, mislead, and manipulate those pursuing her. Each deletion, each change, was deliberate, a breadcrumb left for someone who knew how to read the code. He contacted cyber specialists discreetly, tracing the unmarked numbers and encrypted messages. They led him to temporary accounts, anonymous emails, and virtual phone services, tools often used by professionals in kidnapping schemes to obscure identity and location. Benjamin noted how the communications were timed, the way each message seemed almost conversational yet carried hidden instructions or psychological nudges intended for the Watson family. But Benjamin's greatest advantage lay in understanding human behavior. He knew that even the most sophisticated digital disguises were vulnerable to the predictability of those who crafted them. The timing of messages, choice of words, and subtle patterns of urgency revealed traits: impatience masked as control, arrogance mixed with insecurity, and the occasional slip of familiarity that betrayed personal knowledge of the family's routines. Cross-referencing these traces with the physical clues from the studio and neighborhood surveillance, Benjamin constructed a network of likely suspects. He focused on those with both access and opportunity, weighing each individual's psychological profile, skills, and possible motives. The challenge was not merely identifying the culprits, but understanding the mind behind the orchestration, a mind clever enough to vanish in the city's chaos, yet human enough to leave patterns that could be read. Benjamin noticed one recurring detail: the messages consistently referenced Emily in ways that suggested someone close had knowledge of her habits, fears, and preferences. This indicated an insider connection, a person who understood not just schedules and routines, but psychological triggers. Benjamin marked this as a key lead, knowing that uncovering the insider would unravel the entire kidnapping network. Hours of meticulous analysis yielded another breakthrough. Patterns of the encrypted communication suggested a schedule of interactions, locations where the kidnappers might be operating, and potential dead drops for information. Benjamin mapped the likely safe houses, routes for movement, and points where the kidnappers would attempt to mislead authorities. Every observation tightened the circle, narrowing options and increasing the likelihood of intercepting Emily before irreversible harm could occur. By late night, Benjamin had assembled a mental blueprint of the network, a sophisticated system of deception, manipulation, and control, leveraging both technology and human psychology. He understood the kidnappers' habits, the signals they left behind, and the subtle ways they attempted to exert dominance over the family. Each piece of data, each pattern of communication, was a step toward reclaiming the girl and dismantling the network. As Benjamin prepared to move to the next phase, identifying the insider and setting a cautious trap, he reflected on the stakes. Time was critical, and the kidnappers were deliberate, calculated, and patient. Yet Benjamin's skill lay in patience and observation, in interpreting human behavior and exploiting predictability. The digital traces had revealed more than locations; they had revealed intent, arrogance, and weaknesses he would use to his advantage. The city outside was alive with light, noise, and oblivion, unaware that a quiet, determined detective was navigating a labyrinth of technology, psychology, and human cunning. Benjamin Hart had found the traces in the network, and with them, the path forward to finding Emily Watson. Benjamin Hart understood that in most cases, the most dangerous threats came not from strangers, but from those closest to the victims. The subtlety of the kidnappers' movements suggested a level of insider knowledge that could only come from someone within Emily Watson's inner circle. It was time to examine the people who had access, the individuals who moved unnoticed in the shadows of trust. He began with interviews, carefully observing micro-expressions, voice inflections, and behavioral nuances. The Watson household staff were diligent but nervous; each interaction revealed tiny inconsistencies. A nanny mentioned a slight alteration in Emily's routine that she hadn't noticed before, while a chauffeur seemed unusually vague about his evening route. Benjamin catalogued everything mentally, noting which accounts aligned with known facts and which introduced anomalies. Benjamin then focused on the father's personal assistant, a man named Thomas Keller. Keller had access to schedules, security codes, and confidential communications. While initially appearing professional and composed, Benjamin noticed small hesitations when Keller spoke of recent deliveries and late-night messages. These inconsistencies, minor though they seemed, formed a pattern too significant to ignore. Next, Benjamin considered motives. Kidnappings orchestrated by outsiders often involve financial gain, but when the clues pointed inward, the motive frequently involved personal grudges, professional rivalry, or psychological manipulation. Emily's father was a high-profile businessman, known for both generosity and ruthlessness. Any insider with resentment or a desire to exploit the family's influence could easily become a dangerous collaborator. Benjamin mapped possible motives, weighing access against opportunity and psychological profile. To test his hypothesis, Benjamin began monitoring digital communications more closely, focusing on Keller and other staff. Patterns emerged: encrypted messages sent at odd hours, coded phrases hidden within seemingly mundane emails, and small but deliberate deviations from normal behavior. Each finding confirmed Benjamin's growing suspicion: someone with insider knowledge was facilitating Emily's kidnapping, guiding the external perpetrators, and manipulating the family's perception. The detective proceeded cautiously. Confronting an insider too soon could endanger Emily further. Instead, Benjamin employed subtle psychological probes, asking questions that seemed routine but were designed to elicit revealing reactions. He observed reactions to certain words, the direction of glances, and micro-expressions that betrayed anxiety or deceit. Benjamin's experience allowed him to read between the lines, to interpret hesitation and emphasis as potential evidence of guilt or complicity. Then came a breakthrough. Benjamin discovered a pattern in the timing of messages and movements. Keller had been present during key moments when Emily's routine was altered. Moreover, small details, like knowing the precise location of the cryptic note, indicated that Keller had intimate knowledge of both Emily's habits and the investigation itself. The implication was clear: the insider was more than a passive observer. They were an active participant, guiding the kidnappers and exploiting trust to control outcomes. Benjamin devised a strategy to confirm his suspicions without alarming Keller. By setting controlled scenarios and observing his reactions, he could test the insider's involvement. He knew that the key to the next step was patience, precision, and subtlety. Any error could endanger Emily or push the insider into action that would eliminate evidence. As night fell over Manhattan, Benjamin's mind was a lattice of possibilities. He had identified a likely insider, understood their potential motives, and begun to anticipate their moves. The challenge ahead required careful navigation, drawing the insider into revealing themselves, protecting Emily, and maintaining control over the unfolding situation. Benjamin Hard left the Watson residence once more, his mind alert, his senses attuned to every nuance. The network of threats had expanded to include someone trusted by the family, and the stakes had grown exponentially. Yet Benjamin felt the familiar surge of determination and clarity. The insider had been identified, the next move was crucial, and he was ready to act with the precision and intellect that defined him. The neon lights of Manhattan blurred past Benjamin Hard as he maneuvered through the city streets. The lead he had just intercepted, a cryptic message indicating Emily's possible location, had sent him into immediate motion. Every intersection, every alley, and every shadowed doorway could conceal either Emily or the kidnappers. Speed and caution were both crucial, and Benjamin's mind worked faster than the wheels beneath him. The message had come in the form of a digital riddle, one designed to confuse and delay pursuit. Benjamin deciphered it within minutes, the subtle inconsistencies revealing a trail intentionally left for a clever observer. The instructions pointed to a series of locations across the city, a path that seemed chaotic to an untrained eye but followed a pattern Benjamin could trace with precision. He first arrived at a small, nondescript parking garage. The dim fluorescent lights flickered, casting elongated shadows across empty spaces. Benjamin moved silently, his analytical mind scanning for traps and deviations from the message's predicted pattern. A sudden movement caught his attention, an abandoned jacket with a small note tucked inside. It read, "Almost there. Don't rush. Time is a tool." Benjamin's eyes narrowed. The kidnappers were testing him, gauging his response, perhaps even attempting to manipulate his timing. As he proceeded, Benjamin noted surveillance cameras, potential witnesses, and escape routes, cataloging every detail mentally. The city's constant activity became both a cover and a hazard. Pedestrians, taxis, and cyclists could either obstruct his path or inadvertently provide clues. He relied on his observation skills to extract information from the smallest cues: a glance, a gesture, a hurried step. The chase led him to a narrow backstreet, where the message indicated a drop-off point. Benjamin's instincts told him to anticipate a trap, and he moved accordingly. Around the corner, he spotted a figure darting into an alley, clutching a small bag. Instinctively, he pursued, keeping to the shadows and maintaining a safe distance. The figure's movements were calculated, but Benjamin recognized subtle imperfections in gait and timing, evidence of human error that he could exploit. The pursuit took him across rooftops, through dimly lit passages, and into crowded marketplaces. Each segment of the city offered different challenges: balance, visibility, and risk of exposure. Yet Benjamin's focus never wavered. Every observation, every pattern, was catalogued for immediate and future use. He anticipated the kidnapper's actions, predicting direction changes, potential hiding spots, and likely distractions. At one point, the figure turned sharply into a warehouse district, a location that seemed abandoned yet perfect for concealment. Benjamin paused, analyzing entry points, security measures, and possible obstacles. He noted a delivery door slightly ajar, a faint scuff mark on the concrete, and the echo of footsteps within. Each detail allowed him to reconstruct the route and predict the kidnapper's next move with remarkable accuracy. Finally, Benjamin cornered the figure in a dimly lit alley. The kidnapper froze, realizing the detective had anticipated the path, the timing, and the intention. Benjamin approached calmly, his presence assertive without aggression, psychologically asserting control over the encounter. "Stop," he said, voice measured. "It doesn't have to end badly." The figure hesitated, panic visible in small gestures. Benjamin's skill lay not just in physical pursuit, but in psychological dominance. He allowed the kidnapper no room to maneuver, no escape from observation, while maintaining a stance that minimized risk to both parties. The chase had concluded, but the true challenge, uncovering Emily's location and confronting the network, was only beginning. As Benjamin prepared to extract information from the captured kidnapper, he knew the game had shifted. The threat was no longer abstract, it was immediate, tangible, and dangerous. Yet his confidence remained unshaken. Manhattan's chaos had revealed clues, tested his intellect, and confirmed his skills. The path to Emily was now visible, and Benjamin Hard was ready to follow it to the very end. Benjamin Hard returned to his loft, a quiet sanctuary of books, classical music, and meticulous order. The city outside pulsed with life, oblivious to the high-stakes drama unfolding in its shadows. Sitting at his desk, Benjamin reviewed the information gathered during the chase, cross-referencing the kidnapper's movements, communications, and psychological cues. The puzzle was intricate, but he knew that understanding the motive was key to saving Emily Watson. From the notes, messages, and minor admissions during the pursuit, Benjamin began to piece together a profile. This was not a simple ransom kidnapping. The perpetrators had left calculated clues, demonstrated knowledge of the family's routines, and displayed a preference for psychological manipulation over violence. Their aim was not financial gain, but influence, leverage, and control. Benjamin's attention turned to Emily's father, a high-profile businessman whose decisions impacted millions. The pattern suggested a demand that went beyond money, a public statement, a corporate decision, or an action that would demonstrate power and compliance. By targeting Emily, the kidnappers sought to manipulate his emotions, using fear as a tool to bend his will. Delving deeper, Benjamin examined those who had both motive and access. The likely insider, Thomas Keller, appeared increasingly central. Keller's subtle deviations in behavior, combined with his knowledge of family schedules, painted a portrait of someone willing to exploit trust for personal or professional advantage. Benjamin considered what Keller could gain: influence over company decisions, control of confidential information, or satisfaction of a grudge long held. Further analysis revealed a psychological pattern among the external kidnappers as well. Their calculated communication suggested admiration, or at least acknowledgement, of Keller's influence. They had coordinated their actions with precision, likely relying on his guidance. This dual-layered approach, a combination of insider knowledge and external execution, explained the sophistication of the crime. Benjamin noted that in such schemes, psychological pressure often outweighed physical threat, a tactic designed to force decisions under extreme stress. Benjamin also considered the broader implications. The public exposure of Emily's kidnapping could damage the family's reputation and the father's business, creating leverage far beyond immediate fear. The kidnappers were skilled at predicting human reaction, manipulating media perception, and exploiting emotional vulnerabilities. Understanding this allowed Benjamin to anticipate their next moves, calculate risks, and plan strategic interventions. He reconstructed a timeline of the kidnappers' actions, correlating them with communications, minor errors, and observed behaviors. Each sequence revealed the rhythm of the operation, the psychology of fear employed, and the specific objectives of the perpetrators. Benjamin's insight into human behavior allowed him to differentiate between genuine threats and bluffs, focusing his attention on the true levers of control. By evening, Benjamin had formulated a plan. He would use the insider's predictability, the kidnapper's reliance on communication, and the psychological leverage of timing to orchestrate a controlled confrontation. He knew where the network would likely lead him and how the perpetrators would react when faced with a calm, analytical adversary. As he prepared to act, Benjamin reflected on the nature of human motivation. Fear, ambition, pride, and manipulation were all at play, intersecting in ways that created both danger and opportunity. The kidnapper's motive was clear: not money, not revenge, but psychological dominance. And in understanding this, Benjamin held the key to unraveling the entire scheme and rescuing Emily Watson. The city outside darkened as night fell, yet Benjamin remained alert. He had uncovered the motive, understood the architecture of fear, and positioned himself to counteract it. The challenge ahead required precision, intellect, and courage. And Benjamin Hard was ready to face it. Benjamin Hard knew that in a case like this, information was both a weapon and a shield. The insider he had identified, Thomas Keller, was a dangerous variable, capable of tipping the balance in favor of the kidnappers if handled incorrectly. Benjamin needed a controlled method to communicate with Keller and the external perpetrators without alerting them to his awareness or jeopardizing Emily Watson's safety. He began by creating a series of subtle signals, deliberately ambiguous yet precise enough to elicit confirmation. Small modifications to digital correspondence, hidden markers in otherwise ordinary emails, and indirect references in innocuous messages were all designed to establish a secret line of contact. Benjamin's goal was to prompt the kidnappers to reveal critical information while maintaining control over the narrative. The first breakthrough came when Keller unknowingly responded to a coded message. The insider's reply contained nuances of knowledge that aligned with Benjamin's prior observations, details about Emily's schedule, locations visited, and even minor security adjustments. Each revelation was cross-referenced with previous clues, forming a more detailed map of the kidnappers' operations. Benjamin now had not just suspicion, but actionable intelligence. Benjamin also exploited the psychological tendencies of the kidnappers. They were confident in their planning and careful to maintain appearances, yet the presence of an unknown observer, the detective subtly influencing events, created microstressors. These small disruptions, though invisible to the perpetrators themselves, generated predictable reactions. Benjamin could anticipate decisions, trace routes, and determine the most probable safe houses. Communication was delicate. Each interaction had to balance subtlety with clarity, deception with truth. Benjamin's mastery of human behavior allowed him to construct messages that prompted cooperation from Keller while masking the detective's own intentions. The insider, unaware of Benjamin's depth of understanding, inadvertently guided him closer to Emily's location. As the day progressed, Benjamin pieced together a network of potential hiding spots, escape routes, and the internal hierarchy of the kidnappers. Keller's actions revealed pressure points, times of day when control lapsed, decisions delayed, and routines disrupted. Benjamin mapped these vulnerabilities, preparing to exploit them without endangering the girl. Every detail mattered, from the timing of a lunch delivery to the route taken to check messages. The most revealing information came from a subtle hint embedded in one of Keller's responses, a minor reference to a location in the city rarely used for commercial purposes. Benjamin recognized it immediately, not as a distraction, but as the likely site where Emily was being held temporarily. The clue was delicate, almost playful, yet unmistakable to a mind trained to detect patterns in behavior and language. Benjamin formulated a plan. He would leverage the insider's knowledge and the kidnapper's predictability to stage a controlled extraction. Timing, patience, and psychological insight were crucial. Any misstep could trigger a sudden, dangerous reaction. The detective's role was not only to locate Emily but to manipulate the network into revealing themselves without provoking panic or retaliation. As night settled over Manhattan, Benjamin prepared to move. The secret contact had borne fruit, and the path to Emily Watson had become clearer. Yet he knew the operation was far from over. The kidnappers were cunning, the insider unpredictable, and the stakes impossibly high. Precision, intellect, and timing would decide the outcome. Benjamin Hard paused at the window of his loft, looking out over the city that never slept. The hunt was entering its most critical phase. Emily's life depended on subtlety, strategy, and a calm, calculating mind. And Benjamin Hard had all three. The warehouse loomed ahead, its corrugated steel walls blending into the shadows of the industrial district. Benjamin Hard had traced Emily Watson's location through a combination of insider guidance, encrypted messages, and careful observation of the kidnapper's predictable routines. Every step of the journey had been deliberate, each clue layered with deception, yet Benjamin's analytical mind had navigated the maze with precision. He paused at the entrance, studying the structure. Security cameras, locked doors, and signs of recent activity suggested a high level of preparedness by the perpetrators. Yet Benjamin detected subtle imperfections, a slightly misaligned security sensor, footprints in the dust near a side entrance, and the faint smell of recently burned fuel, likely used to mask their scent. These minute details confirmed what he had suspected: the kidnappers were skilled, but human. Benjamin knew that a direct confrontation could be dangerous, but hesitation could cost Emily her life. He formulated a plan that relied on psychological dominance rather than brute force. By creating uncertainty and exploiting fear, he could manipulate the kidnappers into revealing themselves while minimizing risk to the girl. Every step, every sound, every shadow became part of a calculated strategy. Inside, the warehouse was vast and dimly lit, shelves casting long, angular shadows across the concrete floor. Benjamin moved silently, cataloging escape routes and potential hazards. The faint hum of fluorescent lights was punctuated by distant metallic clatters, movements of the kidnappers within. Each sound was analyzed for distance, direction, and significance. Benjamin's mind, like a chessboard, mapped each possibility and potential outcome. He found Emily in a small, locked room at the far end of the warehouse. She was frightened, yet unharmed, sitting quietly with her knees drawn to her chest. Benjamin's presence was calm and reassuring, a steady force in the chaos surrounding her. "Emily," he whispered, "I'm here. You're safe now. We'll get you out." Her eyes, wide with fear and confusion, reflected a glimmer of hope as Benjamin assessed the situation. The kidnappers, realizing someone had breached their perimeter, emerged cautiously from the shadows. Benjamin's mind raced. He noted their posture, expressions, and subtle gestures, tiny tells of anxiety, hesitation, and overconfidence. He spoke clearly, deliberately asserting psychological control: "Step away. There's no need for violence. I can end this without anyone getting hurt." The confrontation was tense. The kidnappers attempted to intimidate, to assert dominance through sheer presence and threats. Yet Benjamin's calm, analytical demeanor and unflinching confidence disrupted their strategy. Each move they made was anticipated, each bluff recognized. He subtly directed their attention, guiding them into positions where they had no advantage and no escape. Finally, one by one, the kidnappers faltered. Their overconfidence and reliance on psychological manipulation became their undoing. Benjamin's methodical approach, combined with his understanding of human behavior, allowed him to secure the room and neutralize the threat. Emily remained unharmed, her safety ensured by the detective's meticulous planning and unshakable resolve. As the police arrived to take the perpetrators into custody, Benjamin remained in the warehouse for a moment, observing the aftermath. The city outside continued unaware of the peril narrowly averted within its shadows. Every clue, every observation, and every calculated decision had led to this moment. Emily Watson was safe, and the network of kidnappers had been dismantled. Benjamin Hard finally allowed himself a brief moment of satisfaction. The confrontation had tested intellect, courage, and psychological acuity, yet each challenge had been met with precision. He knew the case was nearing its conclusion, but there remained one final step: ensuring justice, understanding the full scope of the crime, and solidifying the lessons learned from this intricate, dangerous operation. Emily Watson blinked against the harsh fluorescent light as Benjamin Hard guided her out of the warehouse. The tension that had gripped her for days began to ease, replaced by a cautious relief. Benjamin's presence was steady, reassuring, and decisive, qualities that made the terrifying ordeal bearable. Every step was calculated, ensuring that Emily remained safe and that no unexpected threat could disrupt their exit. Outside, the city continued its relentless pace, oblivious to the drama that had just unfolded. The police had secured the perimeter, taking the remaining kidnappers into custody. The combination of Benjamin's meticulous planning and the law enforcement response ensured that the perpetrators could not regroup or escape. Benjamin observed each arrest from a distance, confirming that all actors had been accounted for. Emily's father arrived, breathless and pale, his emotions a mixture of relief, guilt, and residual fear. Benjamin gently intervened, allowing the reunion to unfold while maintaining professional composure. "She's unharmed," Benjamin assured him. "The operation went as planned, and the kidnappers are in custody." The father's gratitude was palpable, but Benjamin's focus remained sharp. He knew that even after rescue, the case required careful analysis to prevent future incidents. Benjamin conducted a final assessment of the scene. The warehouse revealed much about the kidnappers' planning: secure but flawed measures, reliance on psychological tactics, and a dependence on insider information. The combination of an internal collaborator and external operatives created a sophisticated but ultimately decipherable network. Benjamin noted each error, each predictable move, and each oversight that had allowed him to succeed. He debriefed the police, providing insights into the kidnappers' methods, motivations, and the insider's role. Thomas Keller, the insider, was taken into custody, his complicity confirmed through cross-referenced communications, patterns of behavior, and Benjamin's observations. Keller's actions had enabled the kidnappers to navigate the family's routines and exploit psychological vulnerabilities, but his predictability had also been the key to the successful rescue. As Emily was reunited with her family in a safe, controlled environment, Benjamin allowed himself a moment of reflection. Every aspect of the case, from digital traces to human behavior, had been a test of intellect, patience, and observational skill. The rescue was not merely a physical act, it was the culmination of careful analysis, anticipation, and a deep understanding of human psychology. Benjamin also considered the broader implications. The incident highlighted the dangers of complacency, the risks posed by insider threats, and the subtle ways in which fear and manipulation could be wielded. He documented each lesson, each insight, and each observation, knowing that such knowledge would inform future investigations. As night fell, Benjamin returned to his loft, Emily safe and the criminals in custody. The city's lights twinkled like distant beacons, indifferent yet comforting in their constancy. Benjamin sat at his piano for a brief moment, letting the gentle strains of classical music calm his mind. The case was not merely about solving a crime, it was about understanding the layers of human behavior, the interplay of trust and deceit, and the relentless pursuit of justice. Emily Watson's ordeal was over, but for Benjamin Hard, the investigation was a reminder of the subtle, intricate, and often dangerous paths that human nature could create. Each case left its mark, a tangle of clues, motives, and behaviors waiting to be unraveled by a mind keen enough to see what others overlooked. The city had returned to its usual rhythm, a symphony of lights, honks, and footsteps, yet for Benjamin Hard, the echoes of the case still resonated. Emily Watson was safe, the kidnappers apprehended, and the insider's betrayal fully exposed. But the resolution of the case extended beyond simple justice, it was an intricate tapestry of human behavior, strategy, and the meticulous application of intellect. In his loft, Benjamin reviewed every aspect of the investigation, cataloging notes, photographs, and observations. The warehouse operation, the encrypted messages, the subtle psychological cues, all were pieces of a complex puzzle that now lay fully assembled. Each detail reinforced a fundamental truth: the most successful criminals were not only clever but predictable, their psychology leaving breadcrumbs for those perceptive enough to notice. The police had taken Keller into custody, and evidence gathered during the operation ensured that both he and the external kidnappers would face prosecution. Benjamin provided a thorough debrief, outlining motives, methods, and behavioral patterns. His analysis emphasized not just what had occurred, but why, the interplay of fear, manipulation, and ambition that drove the crime. Understanding these elements was as critical as apprehending the perpetrators themselves. Benjamin visited the Watson family one final time. Emily, though still shaken, displayed a resilient spark, a reminder of the human spirit's capacity to endure even in the face of calculated terror. Her father, humbled by the ordeal, expressed gratitude that transcended words. Benjamin's presence was quiet and measured, his role not to celebrate, but to ensure the restoration of safety and stability. He reflected on the psychological dimensions of the case. The kidnappers had relied on fear and manipulation, exploiting both access and trust to achieve their ends. Benjamin's success had been grounded not in physical confrontation alone, but in understanding the intricate motives and predictable behaviors that underpinned every action. Each observation, each deduction, had been a step toward restoring control to the victims while dismantling the criminals' network. As evening fell, Benjamin returned to his loft, a place of solace amidst the relentless energy of Manhattan. He poured a cup of green tea, allowing the aroma and warmth to ground him after days of intense focus. He then lit a single cigar, a rare indulgence following the resolution of a particularly complex case, and settled at his piano. The soft notes of Chopin filled the room, a meditative counterpoint to the chaos that had dominated recent days. In the quiet, Benjamin allowed himself to acknowledge the broader significance of the case. It had tested not only his intellect and analytical skill, but also his patience, judgment, and understanding of human nature. The rescue of Emily Watson was a triumph, but it was also a reminder of the fragile balance between trust and deception, preparation and improvisation, observation and intuition. Before night fully settled, Benjamin made a final note in his journal, a small record of another victory, another intricate case unraveled. He preserved a tiny memento from the investigation, a fragment of evidence, a symbolic reminder of the path he had navigated and the lessons learned. Each case left a mark, a mental trophy cataloging the depths of human complexity and the detective's capacity to navigate it. The city continued its restless pace outside, indifferent to the trials that had unfolded within its streets. Yet for Benjamin Hard, Manhattan was a canvas of human behavior, and every crime a puzzle awaiting the careful, steady mind, and unwavering resolve of a detective who saw what others could not. The resolution was complete, Emily was safe, and the shadows of the city had been navigated with clarity, precision, and an unshakable commitment to justice. Benjamin Hard leaned back in his chair, the faint glow of the city lights reflecting in his eyes. Another case closed, another life restored, and yet, somewhere in the vast metropolis, another puzzle waited.